DuBose, and I was a St. Joseph worker for the Los Angeles program. For those of you who aren't familiar with the St. Joseph Worker Program, it's a year of service for young people to serve at a nonprofit organization. I lived in community with 8 other women, and we called ourselves the Notorious 9. I'm so grateful that some of my community mates are here today. They hijacked the table and have pom-poms, so maybe a parent or the people of Sister Julie Furch and Sister Judy Malassi. I want to give a shout out to Sister Julie and Sister Judy, who couldn't be here in person today, but I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be the person I am without them. There's also St. Joseph workers from the Minnesota and New York and probably the Orange program as well. So if you're wanting to feel inspired by the next generation, your homework this weekend is to meet at least one St. Joseph worker. So before we get into this idea of radically transforming community, I'd like to share with you all a quote about what community means to me. And Sister Judy gives me a hard time about picking long quotes, so buckle up. So to absorb this quote with a little more intention, I invite you to close your eyes or take a soft gaze towards the ground. We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been. A place half remembered and half envisioned we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter. A circle of healing, a circle of friends, some place where we can be free. So you can open your eyes if they're closed. For me, community is a space where you can be the authentic you. Community is a space where we're all seen, held, and free. So an example of how I've radically transformed community, even though I served as a case manager for unhoused individuals at St. Joseph Center, I learned and grew significantly from my ministry. But I'd like to talk more about my community living experiences. This was my 3rd time living in intentional community, and what I found is that sometimes that pillar is the hardest part. There's sort of a sibling effect. So for example, when a friend comes over, you don't care if they leave their dirty dishes in the sink, but with your sibling, you care a lot. So I'm going to share a story with you all about one of our community mates, Haley, and she granted me permission to share this story, so don't worry. So towards the end of the year, Haley was going through a difficult time. She had a lot of stress at work. June was the last month of our program and probably the busiest month of our lives. She wasn't sleeping much. We noticed she was more irritable than usual. And when you have such a large group, it's difficult to find a time to check in, and it's also uncomfortable to start those kinds of conversations. One night, miraculously, it was just the 2 of us in the kitchen, the other 7 were at an event, and I could tell she wanted to talk, and she shared with me what everyone else had noticed, that she felt stressed, burned out, exhausted, overwhelmed. But she also shared she felt some shame for snapping at 2 of her other community mates that morning. And she was able to release some things, some tears, her thoughts. And when she was done speaking, I asked if I could share my thoughts with her, and she said yes. So the first thing I shared with her is a phrase I use for myself with my case management clients, so I remain compassionate, kind, and empathetic. And the phrase is, "You're not you when you're hungry." And I stole that from a Snickers commercial. And for those of you who haven't seen the commercial, it depicts a bunch of men playing football in the mud and rain, and one of the football players is Betty White. And Betty White is saying some mean comments, and when someone gives her a Snickers bar to eat, that person turns back into themselves. And so the slogan is, "You're not you when you're hungry." And what I mean by this is that when our needs aren't met, and we're in a state of stress and overwhelm, you don't have the capacity to be the real, authentic you. The second thing I shared with Haley is that this is what community is for. The reason the 9 of us are here is because we want to support one another and we want to be here for one another. And I asked her, how can we support you? And so she shared that she wanted us to know that how irritated she is had nothing to do with us. She was just going through a lot. And I said, okay, did you tell any of us that yet? She grumbled, no, but I will. And she proceeded to text the 2 community members she stepped up that morning to apologize. And to her surprise and mine, this is what they said. It's okay. We see you for all that you are. We see that you're going through a lot, and I hope you know that we're always here for you. And so if I ask you to take anything away from this story, there are 3 things I ask you to remember. 1, you're not you when you're hungry. Have compassion and empathy for those in your community. If you notice that they're not acting like themselves or they are lashing out, I encourage you to approach them with curiosity and compassion rather than assumption. I invite you to go beyond the how are you, good, how are you, and to ask them, what has it been like to be you lately? I've noticed you don't seem like yourself. How are you really? I encourage you also to have compassion for yourself as well. Haley said she almost wished you were mean to her in that moment. So, you gotta give yourself what you pour out. The second thing is that community is a place where we hold all the things, the joyful and the challenging. One of our community mates, Nikki, has a shirt that says around the heart space, less perfection, more authenticity. Community is imperfect and it is messy, but things don't have to be perfect to be beautiful or worthy. Remember that this pandemic is still happening. There are mass shootings every other week, it seems like. There's a war in Ukraine. There's the taking away of other people's rights. Collectively, we're going through a lot right now, and we need to remember to lean on one another. The third takeaway is that we all long for and we all deserve community. Sister Lynn spoke last night about how we need to shift from a mindset of individualism to realizing that we're people in relationship and community. I studied psychology as well, and in my classes we discussed how studies prove human beings are wired for relationships because it's an evolutionary response. But human beings have evolved past the point of needing to connect for basic survival. So why is it that we continue to come back to one another? And I believe it's because there's something deeper there. There's something very spiritual there. I believe it's because we all want to be a part of that space where we're seen, held, and free. To conclude, radically transforming community does not always have to be the big, grand things. It starts small. Community doesn't have to be a distant, far-off, imaginary place. It's something that we all cultivate. I encourage you to focus on cultivating community where you are. Cultivate community in this room, in your neighborhood, with the people you live with, your family, and your friends. And continue to show each other kindness, empathy, and compassion in the everyday moments. We need those moments now more than ever. Thank you so much.